My name is Claire, and this is the story of how I discovered the man I loved, the man I was supposed to marry, was living a double life. But before I tell you how it all unraveled, I need you to understand how carefully he built the illusion, because that is what made the truth so devastating. Daniel was perfect. At least, that was how everyone else described him. Charming but not arrogant. Successful but not boastful. The kind of man who remembered birthdays, held doors open, and made people feel seen. My parents adored him. My friends envied me. Strangers leaned in when he spoke, as if his voice carried some kind of gravity. And me? I believed him. Every smile, every late-night text, every whispered promise of forever. When he proposed, it was exactly how I had always imagined, on a rooftop at sunset. The city stretched out below us like a painting, his hands trembling just enough to make it feel real. I cried. Of course I cried. And when I said yes, I believed I was stepping into the kind of love people write novels about. For weeks after, my life was a blur of wedding planning and congratulations. Dress fittings, cake tastings, endless phone calls with my mother about seating charts and flower arrangements. Through it all, Daniel was steady. Patient. Supportive. Or at least, that was what I told myself. But then, small things began to shift. It was nothing dramatic at first. A late meeting that turned into another and another. A business trip extended by a day with no real explanation. A perfume on his jacket that was not mine, though he swore it was from an over-enthusiastic client hug. Little cracks, hairline fractures in the polished image he projected. I wanted to believe him. I told myself I was paranoid, that stress made people careless, that planning a wedding could make anyone distracted. But in the back of my mind, a whisper grew louder. What if the man I loved was not the man I thought he was? The whisper turned into a knot in my stomach. The kind of knot you cannot untangle, only ignore, until one day you realize it is strangling you from the inside. One night, while he was working late, I sat alone at the kitchen table, my laptop open in front of me. My hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling. I had never gone through his things before. I had never checked his emails, his calendar, his phone. But that night, something inside me cracked. I opened his tablet, the one he always kept close but never locked. At least, not until recently. And that was when I saw it. A message. Not long. Not detailed. Just enough. Last night was incredible. I cannot stop thinking about you. Signed with a single letter. S. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, some spam, some joke. But deep down, I knew better. That was the first thread. And once I pulled it, the whole illusion began to unravel. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the quiet hum of the apartment, the tablet screen still glowing on the table like a confession that refused to dim. The message was short. Just a single line and a single initial. But it changed the way the walls around me sounded, the way my own breath felt in my chest. By morning, the instinct that had always made me the reasonable one was still there, but it had a new edge. I was done explaining away what did not add up. I needed facts. I needed a record that would not tremble when he smiled at me. So I started small. A spiral notebook. A clean page. At the top I wrote a date and a single sentence. This is the day I stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. Then I began a timeline. Late meetings. Extended trips. The first time he flipped his phone over when he set it down. The first missing receipt for a dinner I did not attend. The message from S. I kept my routine the way he liked it. I did not cancel dress fittings. I did not stop talking about menus or florals. I drank coffee at the same time, texted him the same good mornings. But behind the decorum, I was building a file. Quiet. Methodical. Unapologetic. That afternoon, I opened our shared wedding email. He had created it to keep us organized, which now felt like a private joke. Vendors. Contracts. Deposits. Buried between them, a confirmation for a same-day courier I had never authorized. The delivery address was not familiar. A private mailbox service, the kind where people rent a numbered suite to look like a proper office. I wrote it down. Next, his loyalty apps. The harmless ones he had shown me once while bragging about points he would turn into a honeymoon upgrade. I had never cared enough to remember the passwords. He had never cared enough to change them. The airline history made my stomach tighten. A round trip to a nearby city he had no clients in. A boutique hotel reservation paid with a card I did not recognize. Not a company card. Not ours. Something separate. I did not confront him. Not yet. I started moving money. Nothing dramatic, nothing he could accuse me of later. I opened a new account in my own name and redirected the small streams of my income that had been pouring into the wedding. The cake deposit. The photographer's second installment. The venue balance was still due. That sat where I could see it now, not where he could reach it with a smile and a story. I made copies of every contract and kept them on a flash drive in my glove compartment. Calm is a weapon when you know how to use it. The next crack appeared that evening. He came home late. Not loud. Not guilty. Just a fraction too careful. He kissed me on the forehead, not the mouth, and set his keys on the counter by feel, like a magician hitting a practiced mark. "How was your day?" he asked. "Productive," I said. I watched him open the refrigerator, watched his eyes skip over the places where I kept notes for him, little reminders he used to find charming. He shut the door and leaned on the handle as if he needed the prop. "I might need to drive out tomorrow," he said. "Client thing." "It is nothing." "Where?" I asked. Too casual. Almost bored. He named a town I knew well enough to know he did not work there. I nodded like I believed him and took the empty wine glass to the sink. While I ran water over it, I caught his reflection in the window. His face was relaxed. Or he wanted me to think it was. He had never been more careful with his hands. He slept soundly. I did not. At dawn, I woke to the soft vibration of his phone as a calendar alert appeared and disappeared. I did not reach for it. I reached for my shoes. He left just after sunrise in his gray sedan. I waited a minute, maybe two, then slipped my notebook into my tote, slid into my car, and followed. Not close. Not reckless. I drove like a woman who had errands, not like a fiancée tailing her future husband through side streets he should not have known so well. He took the freeway out of the city, then an exit toward a quieter neighborhood lined with maples and narrow sidewalks. Houses with porches. Bicycles on lawns. The kind of street where people wave because everyone knows everyone. He slowed near a corner and turned down a block with a name that sounded like it belonged in a children's book. Hawthorne Court. I parked a street over and killed the engine. From where I sat, I could see his car pull to the curb across from a narrow brick townhouse with a black door and window boxes still blooming despite the early chill. He did not honk. He did not text. He sat a moment, looked down at his lap, then got out, walked up the steps, and knocked twice. Not tentative. Familiar. The door opened. A woman stood there. I could not see her face at first, only the line of her shoulders and the fall of dark hair over a gray sweater. She stepped aside. He went in. The door closed. I do not know how long I sat there. Long enough to feel my heartbeat move from my throat back into my chest. Long enough to recognize the small blue scooter leaned against the stoop. Long enough to notice the chalk drawings on the sidewalk, half-washed by last night's rain. There was a sound then. A laugh. A child's laugh. Clear. Close. The kind that does not belong to strangers. I did not take pictures. Not that day. I did not need evidence to convince anyone else. I needed air. On the way home, I stopped at a florist and bought lilies. White. He is allergic to lilies. He told me that on our second date with a grin like confession. I put them in a vase on the hall table and waited because I wanted to see if he saw them. I wanted to see if he flinched. He came home at dusk. He noticed the flowers immediately. A flicker across his face. Quick. Contained. "Those are pretty," he said. "Do you like them?" I asked, my voice soft enough to pass for naive. He smiled. "They look expensive." Not a word about the headache he would pretend to get. Not a theatrical sneeze. Just a tiny calculation behind his eyes, followed by a joke to move us forward, away, anywhere but through. After dinner he showered. I wiped the counter in slow circles and waited for the water to stop, for the steam to clear, for his footsteps to pass the hall table again. They did. He did not look at the lilies a second time. He knew I knew, and he would not give me the satisfaction of watching him react. I went to bed before him. When I heard him settle in, I turned toward the window. His hand found my shoulder, warm, rehearsed. "Big week," he murmured. "You doing okay?" "I am fine," I said. He slept. I listened to the night and made my real plan. In the morning, I called a number my friend Maya had given me years ago after her own almost marriage unraveled in a tangle of "it was only one time" and "you know I love you." She had said, "Save this in your notes under something boring." I had. The contact read, "Plumber." When the woman answered, her voice was plain and professional. "You do not know me," I said. "But I need someone discreet." "Discreet is the only work worth doing," she replied. "Tell me what you need." "I think my fiancé is living a second life," I said. "I do not want to blow up mine until I know what is true." "Then we will build you a bridge," she said. "Not a bomb." She asked for what she needed. Dates. Times. The address on Hawthorne Court. I gave her everything I had and nothing I could not prove. Before we hung up, she said, "One more thing, start photocopying. Anything with signatures. Anything that would matter if you had to walk away in a hurry." When the call ended, I opened the drawer where we kept our household file. Lease. Insurance. The shared credit card we used for wedding things. I copied what pertained to me and left what did not. I took my passport and slipped it into the inside pocket of my tote. Not because I planned to run. Because I planned not to be trapped. That night he brought home takeout and a bottle of wine he knew I liked. He talked about the rehearsal dinner as if nothing in the air between us had changed. He was attentive in precisely the way a man is when he wants you to look at his hands and not the door he is walking through. When he went to brush his teeth, his phone lit up on the counter. A text preview. Not a name. Just the same letter. S. My pulse stayed even. I rinsed my glass and set it on the rack. He came back in, slid his phone into his pocket, and leaned in to kiss my cheek. "Early day tomorrow," he said. "I will be out before the sun." "Drive safe," I replied. "I always do." He did not know it yet, but I was done driving blind. I had my timeline. I had a name that was not a name. I had an address that did not belong to us. And by the end of the week, I would have the one thing men like Daniel never account for when they build double lives. A woman who refuses to be fooled twice. Shall I continue with part 3, the second door, what was behind Hawthorne Court, and how I turned watching into leverage? The hardest part of carrying a secret is pretending you do not feel its weight. By the third day, the notebook in my tote felt heavier than any bouquet, heavier than any diamond. Each new line I wrote pressed down on the page like stone. Dates. Times. Small details no one else would notice. The shirt he changed into before meetings, the way his eyes flicked left when he lied, the hollow quiet that followed when he thought I had not caught it. The investigator, she told me to call her Harper, sent the first update on a Thursday morning. No phone call. Just a plain envelope slipped under my apartment door. My name handwritten in ink that looked too steady to belong to someone nervous. Inside, photographs. Daniel arriving at the townhouse. Daniel leaving 2 hours later. Daniel walking with a woman in the gray sweater, holding a paper bag from a cafe down the street. The final photograph was different. He was not with her. He was kneeling on the sidewalk in front of the scooter I had noticed. A child, maybe 5, stood beside him. Small hands clutching a helmet. Daniel's face softened in a way I had not seen in years. Not the mask he wore at our dinners, not the polished smile he offered my parents, but something more natural. Familiar. I studied that photograph until my throat tightened. Because in his eyes, I saw recognition. Not of me. Not of our vows. Recognition of a life I had no place in. There was a note tucked behind the photographs. Hawthorne Court is not a fling. It is a second household. Woman's name, Serena. Child, Ethan. Daniel pays utilities in cash. More to follow. H. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the same drawer where we kept the wedding invitations waiting to be mailed. Side by side. His lie and his promise. Both printed on paper. That evening, Daniel came home humming. Actually humming, like he had not a shadow in the world. He dropped his keys, kissed me lightly, and pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. A surprise, he said. Inside, earrings. Simple, tasteful, expensive. Just because. I smiled as if my heart were not splintering. They're beautiful, I whispered. He looked satisfied, almost smug, as if gifts could erase absence, as if gold could polish rot. I thanked him, kissed him back, and let him believe I was soothed. Because the truth was not ready to be spoken aloud. Not yet. Later, while he showered, I slipped into the study. His laptop was open, logged into the shared drive we used for wedding documents. A new folder caught my eye. Labeled simply, Other. I clicked. Inside were scan statements from an account I had never seen. Transactions to a private school. To a pediatrician. To a landlord whose address matched Hawthorne Court. Monthly, regular, careful. I copied everything onto my flash drive, closed the folder, and returned to bed before the water stopped running. When he slid beside me, damp and warm, I let him rest his head on my shoulder. He whispered something about the honeymoon. Paris, maybe Rome. He promised we would toast under foreign stars. I did not answer. My mind was already building a map, not of cities we might visit, but of the world he thought I would never find. The next morning, Harper called. Her voice was steady. Do you want the truth faster, or do you want it gentler? Faster, I said. Then you need to come with me. I met her at a cafe 2 blocks from Hawthorne Court. She slid into the booth opposite me, a folder in her hands. He has been maintaining this for nearly 4 years, she said. Rent in her name, utilities in his. They share custody of the child, though unofficially. He picks him up from school twice a week. Serena introduces him as Ethan's uncle. Neighbors know him as a family friend. My stomach nodded. For years. That was before the proposal. Before the planning. He had been building 2 lives at once. Harper's eyes softened. I have one more thing. From her folder, she pulled a photograph. Daniel and Serena, standing close in the glow of Christmas lights. Ethan perched on Daniel's shoulders, laughing. Daniel's hands steadying him, Serena's arm wrapped around Daniel's waist. They looked like the very image of a family portrait. I stared at it until the edges blurred. Harper did not interrupt. She let silence do the work. Finally, I asked, what would you do if this were your life? She held my gaze. I would not burn it down. Not yet. I would build leverage. Because men like Daniel, they do not expect you to fight on their terms. They expect you to beg. Use what you have. And when the time is right, make him choose which life he wants to lose. That night, I returned home with the photograph in my bag, hidden between 2 bills. Daniel was already there, cooking pasta, humming again like a man rehearsing contentment. He asked about my day. I told him it was ordinary. He told me he had a late meeting tomorrow. I smiled, poured wine, and thought about the truth sitting inches away in my purse. The wedding was 3 weeks away. But the end of the performance was closer. The strangest thing about betrayal is how normal the evenings look while it is happening. Dinner plates clink against polished wood. Laughter echoes from a television neither of you is really watching. The ordinary hum of life continues, even as the ground beneath it is splitting in 2. That Friday evening was no different. Daniel came home whistling softly, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. He set them down on the counter, kissed my cheek, and said he wanted to cook for us. His tone was casual, practiced, too smooth. I watched him move through the kitchen like a man who believed his performance was flawless. He did not know I had already seen the photographs. He did not know I had the receipts. And that was when I decided I would not scream. I would not accuse. I would not play the role he expected, the furious fiancé begging for honesty he would never give. Instead, I would press gently, with silence and observation, until he cracked on his own. We ate at the table. Candlelight flickered between us, catching the gold of my new earrings, the ones he had bought to distract me. He asked about my day, his eyes steady, his smile rehearsed. I gave him small answers. Not cold, not distant, but quiet. Silence unsettles liars more than questions do. After dinner, he poured wine, leaned back, and began talking about the honeymoon again. Imagine Paris in the spring, he said. We will walk along the Seine. Maybe Venice too. Gondolas, music. I watched him describe futures he would never give me, and when he finally paused, I leaned forward. Daniel, I said softly, are you happy? He blinked. The question threw him off balance. Not, where were you last night? Not, who is Serena? Just a quiet invitation to expose himself. Of course I am, he said too quickly. His glass tapped against the table, a subtle tremor in his hand. Why do you ask? I tilted my head, eyes steady on his. You have seemed different, distracted, like your mind is somewhere else. For a moment, his jaw tightened. Just for a moment. Then the mask slid back into place. He smiled, reached across the table, squeezed my hand. I am just tired. Work has been insane. But you know that. After the wedding, after the honeymoon, it will all feel better. I nodded slowly, pretending to believe him. Then I let silence settle again. Heavy, deliberate. He shifted in his seat. Claire, what are you thinking? I smiled faintly, leaned back. I am thinking that secrets always surface eventually. The air shifted. His eyes flickered only once, but enough. A tiny crack in the perfect script. He laughed, too loudly. What kind of secrets could I possibly have? I held his gaze, let the silence stretch until it hurt. Finally I said, that is what I am waiting to find out. I rose from the table, placed my empty glass in the sink, and left him sitting there in the candlelight, his smile faltering for the first time. That night, he held me a little too tightly in bed. His breathing was uneven. And though he whispered, I love you, into the darkness, I knew the words were a shield, not a truth. The next morning, he left early, claiming a meeting. I waited 15 minutes, then pulled the photograph from my drawer. Daniel, Serena, and Ethan beneath glowing lights. His hands steadying a child that was not mine. I set it on the kitchen counter, right beside his forgotten keys. Not hidden. Not displayed. Just there. And when he returned hours later, his eyes landed on it instantly. His whole body froze. I did not speak. I only looked at him. Where did you get this? He asked, his voice low, strained. I said nothing. His fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. He swallowed hard, the mask slipping. For the first time, Daniel was afraid not of losing me, but of losing control of the narrative. And that was when I realized I did not need to expose him. He was already unraveling. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I simply stood there, arms folded, the photograph lying silent between us. Daniel shifted his weight like a man balancing on glass. Claire, he said finally, his voice coated with a brittle calm, this is not what it looks like. Of course he said that. Liars always do. I tilted my head slightly, waiting, offering him the rope he would use to hang himself. He picked up the photograph, held it as if he could erase it with pressure alone. This is Serena. She is just a friend. Ethan, his throat worked. He is her nephew. I help them out sometimes. She went through a bad divorce and I let him speak. His words tumbled like dominoes, each one less convincing than the last. His eyes flickered to mine, searching for doubt, for softness. I gave him none. Daniel, I said quietly, you look happy in that picture. He froze. Not guilty. Not caught. Happy. It was the one truth he could not hide. He forced a smile, shaking his head. I am happy with you. You are imagining things. You have always had a suspicious streak. That cut deeper than it should have, and he knew it. A classic pivot, turn the blame, make me question myself. But I was done doubting. I walked to the sink, rinsed my empty glass, and spoke without turning around. Do you know what I realized, Daniel? Secrets do not destroy people. Silence does. The silence between who you are and who you pretend to be. Behind me, I heard his breath catch. Just a fraction, but enough. When I turned back, his mask had cracks I could see from across the room. His hand trembled slightly as he set the photograph back down. "Claire," he whispered, "you do not understand. I was going to tell you. After the wedding. I needed time." There it was. A confession, not in full, but enough to prove the truth was real and alive, festering between us. I walked closer, placed my hand gently on the counter, close to his but not touching. "Tell me now," I said softly. His lips parted, but no words came. He shook his head, eyes darting toward the door as if escape might save him. And that was when I knew I had broken the performance. Daniel was no longer in control. I did not press further. Not yet. I simply picked up the photograph, slipped it back into the drawer, and said, "Dinner is getting cold." Then I walked away, leaving him standing in the kitchen, his world collapsing in silence. That night, he tried to touch me in bed. I shifted slightly, not rejecting, but not welcoming. He whispered promises I had heard 100 times before, but the tone was different now. Desperate. Hollow. He did not know that every promise, every word, every silence was ammunition I was storing. Because soon, the wedding would arrive. And I would be ready. The days that followed felt like standing inside the eye of a hurricane, still on the surface, but everything around me charged with invisible force. Daniel carried on with his charade, as though nothing had shifted. He smiled at me over morning coffee, texted me during the day with sweet nothings, kissed my forehead at night. But I saw the difference. The bouquet of flowers that appeared every other day. The expensive necklace he left on my nightstand without explanation. The sudden insistence that we plan our honeymoon down to the last detail. These were not acts of love, they were offerings to keep me quiet. And I accepted them gracefully, with a smile that never reached my eyes. Because now I had a plan. The wedding was only 2 weeks away. 2 weeks until he stood before friends, family, and God, vowing a love he had already betrayed. And I would let him. I would let him stand there, certain of his performance, confident in his double life. Then, when the lights were brightest and the crowd was largest, I would take everything from him. But revenge is not just a performance. It is preparation. So I began to collect. First, I met with Isabel. Her face was pale when I laid the photograph in front of her, her hands trembling as she traced the edges. "I knew," she whispered. I knew, but I did not want to believe it. Together, we compared notes. His weekends away, his excuses, the gifts that did not match the stories. Piece by piece, his double life assembled itself like a puzzle we had both been holding fragments of. Second, I gathered evidence. The receipts he left carelessly in his pockets. The emails he thought he had deleted, but that lingered in the recycle bin. The photographs he kept tucked away in a folder marked work trips. And third, I crafted the stage. I arranged with the wedding planner, subtly, carefully, to have a slideshow of our memories prepared for the reception. Daniel believed it would be filled with photographs of us through the years. What he did not know was that I had swapped many of them out. Not all. Just enough. Just enough to expose him when the time was right. I did not tell Isabel every detail. Some truths cut too deeply to be handled all at once. But I told her enough to steady her, to let her know she was not alone. At night, when Daniel lay sleeping beside me, I would study his face in the shadows. He looked peaceful, unburdened, as if lies did not weigh on him the way they did on me. And in those quiet hours, I wondered, did he truly believe he could keep 2 lives forever? Did he think betrayal left no trace, no scars? I kissed his cheek one night softly, like a farewell he would not recognize. Because the storm was gathering, and when it finally broke, it would not be me caught in the wreckage. It would be him. The morning of the wedding arrived draped in silence. Not the calm kind, but the charged silence that comes before thunder. The world outside was dressed in sunlight, but inside me, a storm churned. Daniel was radiant, confident, striding about in his tailored suit like a man walking into a victory rather than his own downfall. He kissed my hand, looked me in the eye, and whispered, "Today, our forever begins." I smiled. Not because I believed him, but because I knew his forever would end before the night was over. The venue was breathtaking. White roses lined the aisle. A string quartet played softly, their bows moving in perfect rhythm. Guests filled the pews, whispering about how beautiful the day was, how lucky I must feel. If only they knew. My dress was perfect. Not because of the lace or the pearls, but because I chose it with purpose. Strong shoulders, a train that swept behind me like a shadow. I did not feel like a bride. I felt like a queen preparing for judgment. As I walked down the aisle, Daniel's eyes filled with something I had once mistaken for love. Today, I saw it for what it was: control. He needed this moment. He needed the performance. The vows began. His words were smooth, eloquent, rehearsed. He spoke of loyalty, of devotion, of being mine and only mine. Guests dabbed at tears, mothers smiled, fathers nodded with approval. But as his voice carried through the room, I felt nothing. His promises were ash in the air. When it was my turn, I took the card from my pocket, but I did not read from it. Instead, I folded it, slipped it into my bouquet, and looked straight into his eyes. My vow, I said slowly, my voice steady, is that I will never live in silence. I will never ignore truth, no matter how painful. And I will never again let love blind me to betrayal. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel's confident smile faltered, only slightly, but enough for me to see the panic flicker in his eyes. The ceremony ended with applause, but beneath it, I could feel the whispers, the questions. And then came the reception, the moment I had been waiting for. Guests filled the hall, glasses of champagne glittering in their hands. The band played softly as waiters carried trays of hors d'oeuvres. The mood was bright, celebratory. Daniel was in his element, laughing, shaking hands, basking in admiration. When the lights dimmed and the projector flickered to life, he smiled broadly, placing an arm around my waist. "Our memories," he whispered. "Yes," I thought. "Our memories and yours." The first photographs drew soft laughter, warm sighs. Childhood snapshots. College days. Our first apartment. Daniel leaned in, proud, smug. And then, seamlessly, the shift began. A photograph of him at a restaurant, but not with me. Serena beside him, her hand resting on his. Another picture, him holding Ethan on his shoulders, smiling in a way I had not seen in years. More followed. Different cities, different dates, proof of a second life lived in secret. The room fell into stunned silence. Gasps echoed like thunder. Forks clattered against plates. Eyes widened, whispers spread like wildfire. Daniel's arm dropped from my waist. His face drained of color. "What is this?" he hissed under his breath. I didn't answer. I simply raised my glass, turned toward the crowd, and said clearly to the truth. The hall erupted. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some stared at Daniel with disgust, others at me with pity, but it did not matter. The secret was out. Daniel lunged for the projector, shouting, "Turn it off. This is a mistake." But it was too late. His perfect double life had shattered, and everyone had seen the pieces. The silence that followed was not the silence of awe. It was the silence of judgment, sharp and suffocating. Dozens of eyes turned toward Daniel, dissecting every line on his face, every frantic gesture of his hands. He stumbled forward, voice raised, desperate. These photos are fake. Someone is trying to ruin me." But no one believed him. The details were too specific, too damning. His suit, his watch, the dates written on menus in the background, Ethan's wide smile as Daniel carried him through a park. These were not fakes. These were truths he had buried, now unearthed under the glow of crystal chandeliers. Guests began whispering, voices low but audible. "Is that his son? Who's the woman? God, does she know?" Celeste, his boss's wife, shook her head slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line. My maid of honor, Isabel, tightened her grip on my arm, steadying me though I did not need steadying. I was not the one unraveling. Daniel rushed to the stage, seizing the microphone with shaking hands. "Everyone, please. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain." But explanations require coherence, and Daniel had none left. His words fell apart, stumbling over themselves. She was just a friend. A coworker. I helped with her nephew sometimes, that's all. "Claire, tell them." His plea cut through the air, and suddenly, all eyes turned to me. The betrayed bride. I stood, calm, deliberate, raising my champagne glass once more. Tell them what, Daniel? That I discovered your double life only weeks ago? That while I was planning our future, you were building another family behind my back? What should I say? Gasps rippled again, louder this time. Daniel's face collapsed into something I had never seen before, naked fear. He dropped the microphone, the metallic thud echoing through the hall. He tried to cross the room toward me, but Isabel stepped forward, blocking his path with a stare that could slice glass. Daniel, she said evenly enough. The band stopped playing. The waiters froze. Even the candles seemed to flicker lower as the weight of his downfall pressed on the room. I turned back toward the crowd, my voice steady, my words deliberate. I will not be the woman who keeps silent. Not today. Not ever again. Consider this the last lie I will let him tell. Applause erupted, not the joyful kind, but the righteous kind. The kind that carries judgment and finality. Daniel stood there, chest heaving, face pale, surrounded by people who once respected him, now staring at him like a stranger. And in that moment, his world collapsed, not with a scream, but with silence. The ballroom was no longer a place of celebration. It was a courtroom without a judge, a stage where Daniel stood accused and guilty in the same breath. Guests began to stir, some rising from their seats, others whispering into their phones, already spreading the story beyond these walls. The scandal had wings, and I knew it would not take long before his downfall became public beyond this room. Daniel's parents were the first to move. His mother pressed a trembling hand to her lips, her eyes glassy with shame. His father, stone-faced and silent, placed an arm around her shoulder, but never once looked at Daniel. Not once. My own family sat frozen, caught between pity for me and horror at the scene unraveling before them. My mother reached for my hand, but I did not take it. This was not her battle. This was mine. Daniel made one last attempt to salvage himself. He raised his hands, his voice cracking. Please, you have to believe me. This isn't what it looks like. I love her, he said, pointing at me, his voice desperate now. I've always loved her. The crowd shifted uneasily. His words rang hollow, like glass already cracked. I stepped forward, my voice calm, carrying across the room. Love. I repeated softly, almost with wonder. If this is love, Daniel, then tell me, was it love when you promised me a future while hiding another life? Was it love when you kissed me goodnight and then held someone else the next day? Was it love when you let me plan a wedding you never intended to honor? Every word landed like a hammer. Daniel's face crumbled, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of his lies finally pressed him into the ground. Celeste, the matriarch of Dominic's family, the family Daniel had been desperate to impress, stood then, her presence commanding. She looked at him with a gaze that could strip a man bare. You embarrassed my family, humiliated this woman, and insulted every guest in this room. You will never be welcome in our circles again. Her words sealed it. Whatever power Daniel once had, it was gone. The doors to his carefully constructed world were slamming shut, one by one. I lifted my glass once more, the liquid catching the light. To new beginnings, I said quietly, but the microphone carried it across the silent hall. And with that, I set the glass down, turned, and walked out of the ballroom. My train swept behind me, not like a bride leaving her wedding, but like a queen leaving a battlefield. Behind me, I could still hear the murmurs, the whispers, the sound of Daniel's pleas growing fainter. But none of it mattered anymore. Because for the first time in years, the silence was mine and mine alone. I did not look back when I left that hall. Not once. The weight of my dress, the stares of the guests, the sound of Daniel's voice cracking into nothing, it all faded the second the night air touched my skin. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt free. The world outside the ballroom was quiet, untouched by the chaos behind those doors. The stars were steady, the wind was cool, and I realized something simple yet powerful. The wedding had happened. Just not the way Daniel thought it would. He wanted a perfect ceremony, a flawless reception, a new life built on deception. Instead, He got the truth unveiled in front of everyone he tried to impress. And me? I walked away with my dignity intact, stronger than I had ever been. The fallout came quickly. Within days, Daniel lost more than just me. His reputation collapsed. The people he once courted for business refused his calls. His family, too ashamed to defend him, quietly distanced themselves. And the woman he had hidden, the one whose child he called his own, didn't stand by him either. She walked away too, unwilling to be tethered to a man with nothing left to give. I, on the other hand, discovered something unexpected in the silence that followed. Peace. I wasn't broken. I wasn't humiliated. I was liberated. Because once the lie shattered, I no longer had to question what was real. People often ask what revenge really is. Is it loud? Is it cruel? Is it fire and fury? Sometimes. But in my case, revenge was simple. It was truth. It was letting Daniel's own actions ruin him. It was stepping aside and allowing the world to see what I had already discovered. That night wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one. A life without his lies, without his secrets, without the constant gnawing fear that the person I loved most was really a stranger. So if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever discovered a truth that broke you open, I want you to hear me now. You are not the weak one. You are not the fool. You are the one who chose to face reality when someone else chose to bury it. And that makes you stronger than they will ever be. My fiancé cheated 2 weeks before our wedding. But the wedding still happened. And when it was over, he lost everything, while I walked away with something he could never take from me myself. And that, in the end, was the sweetest revenge of all.